was a kid and dancing competitively / pre-professionally, my friends and I used to joke around as our knees cracked and our hips popped that we would be needing hip replacements by the time we were 30 years old. And it was funny back then. I'm 2 years out from 30 now. I'm not laughing. For those who don't know me or who are new to my channel, welcome. I am the Natural Deanna, aka Dr. Bourne. I am a naturopathic doctor in Ontario, Canada, and going on my own injury journey. This series is about taking you along for that journey, as well as teaching you the principles that I've learned along the way. If you are interested so far, please hit that like button, subscribe, and follow along. Excuse me. So in episode 1 of this series, I revealed that I was diagnosed with osteoarthritis in my left hip last year. First off, what is osteoarthritis? It's an inflammatory condition that causes degeneration of the joint tissue around the ends of a joint. So it could be in your fingers, it could be your knees, it could be your hips. Commonly, it's hips and knees because it's in the areas that are weight-bearing, mainly because it's due to inflammation and overuse. A lot of grinding of the joint tissue together that causes that inflammation and degeneration. I was diagnosed through physical exams as well as getting an x-ray done to show that degeneration. Now, they told me it was minimal, so at least there's that, but my pain was definitely not minimal. It limited my range of motion, it stopped me from being able to dance and enjoy it as much as I wanted to, which is kind of what led me down this journey of 1, getting the diagnosis, and 2, creating my injury recovery journey. It's not an uncommon condition, but it is uncommon in someone who is 28 years old. Usually because of overuse, and over time, people get diagnosed with this in like their 60s or 70s. I just lost a lot of light. Hold on a second. Okay, it's back. People can live full and happy lives with this condition, but if it starts to impede on daily activities of living or cause significant pain, then surgery is suggested to replace the joint capsule. We're not really sure why it starts to happen in some people, other than, the overuse over time kind of thing that I mentioned before, but there are also things that we've learned in the research that can make it go slower or faster, and we'll get into that in another video. One of the reasons why I might need surgery before I'm 60 or 70 years old is because I'm still dancing and still doing all of these activities, and kind of the activities that are aggravating my hip, and I'm not really planning on stopping. So in order for me to be able to actually keep moving and stay healthy and, not have surgery at 30 years old, I do need to make some lifestyle changes and some exercise changes as well to make sure that my hip stays strong and the muscles around it are supportive of the bones so that I'm not in such pain and causing worsening of my symptoms. Now, I've talked to you about how this is an inflammatory condition as well as it being a wear and tear overuse kind of condition. For me, both of those apply, and now I'm going to tell you why. Overuse. So with overuse injuries, it's usually because of repetitive movements happening. And with those repetitive movements, it's the repeated motions of the bones either rubbing together or the cartilages rubbing together and wearing off, which is why they're called wear and tear injuries. You're wearing down the cartilage and the bones that are protective, and they're starting to shear and tear and cause that inflammation and that pain that you feel. When that happens, our body has a protective mechanism of tightening our muscles around it to kind of secure the joint a little bit more, because our bones and cartilage are the very base of our structure, and then our muscles are what move it around. If our body thinks that the base of our structure is in danger, we're going to do everything we can to make sure to protect it. And if we're not paying attention properly, and we still try and force ourselves to move through those movements with those tight muscles, it just means that those joints are coming together that much more, causing more grinding and inflammation. On top of that, with the tightening of your muscles and the possible pain that you're feeling, you're going to be compensating your movements and creating poor movement patterns that hopefully won't last your entire lifetime. Inflammation. Outside of the structural pieces that I just talked about, we also have inflammation that happens. Yes, inflammation happens because the rubbing together of the joint space and that acute pain response, but you also have to think about systemically and how your body is responding to that. Inflammation can come in many different forms. Usually it comes in the form of stress on the joints and mental stress. Low-grade stress is fine because if you have an acute injury, that's how we get more blood to the area to actually help with healing. But if it's overuse, repetitive, and it keeps going for a long time, that inflammatory response actually becomes very negative and detrimental to your system. For me personally, I've had that chronic inflammation response because I danced for so long and did not take care of my hip properly, as well as thinking about what I was eating. I was exercising a lot while I was competitively dancing, but I was not eating enough to be able to sustain that. And that also put my body into what I like to call the survival mode, because it didn't know when it was going to get its next meal, so it retained everything, and it caused my body, unbeknownst to me, to go into a stress state. It decreased my systems that helped with lowering inflammation, as well as other issues that, again, we'll get into later on in the episodes. Now that I've told you what's wrong with me, I'm going to tell you how I'm fixing it. So my sports med MD and my rheumatologist are hopeful that as long as I decrease my movement, I should be able to live a happy, healthy life and not need to have my hip replaced or any surgery until I'm in my 60s. We both know that's not going to happen. I'm still going to be dancing, I'm still going to be moving. So I need to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to protect my hip and protect the structures around it so that I can keep moving and I can keep doing what I love doing without any sort of pain and without increasing my risk of injury. Inflammation control. The biggest thing that I need to make sure I'm paying attention to is the systemic inflammation that's building up in my body. And I'm going to be managing that by managing the stress that I'm putting on into my body. I've talked about how I'm supposed to be eating properly for nutrition in episode 2, so that is what I'm doing as well. I'm making sure I'm getting enough protein in my diet and matching my calories to my weight as well. Making sure I'm taking in enough fuel for the amount of activity that I'm doing, as well as my daily living. With all of the activity I'm doing, I'm also making sure that I'm balancing out my rest time so that my body has the amount of time to recover properly from the amount of stress that I've put it under. That involves going to bed at a reasonable hour, it involves having my rest days from my exercise days, and it involves finding activities that actually calm my system down rather than revving it up. Another thing to think about as you're worrying about inflammation control is how your digestive system is moving. Because you can be taking in all of these wonderful anti-inflammatory foods, but if you're not actually pushing them out and excreting them properly, it's just building up in your system and nothing is moving well. Physical work. I mentioned that I was seeing a sports med MD and a rheumatologist. Additional to that, for proper rehab, I'm also seeing a physiotherapist and a chiropractor. I'm making sure to be able to open up the space in the joint capsule again and loosen those muscles around it so I'm not increasing that possible grinding and that possible pain sequence that's happening. We're working on hip mobility as well as increasing the strength in my core as well as my hip flexors. Hormone control. Another thing that's actually unique to me, and because of my poor eating habits, is a hormonal imbalance. So I made sure to consult a naturopathic doctor to be able to talk to me about my hormone levels and how my cycle moves throughout the month. If you want me to create a whole video about how your hormones influence inflammation and your bone health, then put a comment below. I've been working on what I've been eating, as well as adding in a few supplements to boost up my hormone levels so that they're in a good spot for my healing. The long game. The last thing I'm going to share is that this is a long-term process for me, and I'm aware of that. I can't go into this thinking that I'm going to be completely better after 1 week when I've been doing this to my body for almost 20 years. This is a lifestyle change and a process that I'm going through. And I'm changing it for the better. I'm changing it so that I can keep moving and keep doing what I love, and I can retire on my own terms. My sport, and any sport for that matter, has a high physical demand on my body. So I need to make sure that I'm protecting it the best I can. I know this now, and I want to make sure that you do too. Well, that wraps up this episode, and I hope that you learned something that you can take along on your injury journey as well. Thank you so much. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.